All right, what's going on, everybody? I have a doozy to discuss, and I just, I don't know what to say. I don't know how to introduce this movie, so we're just gonna get into it, and we're gonna talk about, of course, the substance. Let's get into this. All right, I had to do things a little bit differently. You notice I'm in an undisclosed location. I had to switch things up because this is October, and I'm going to be discussing some darker things this month, and I can't afford to have the darkness, spirits, monsters, and things come find me. So I figured I would start doing some of these videos from the secret location. But on to happier things. Happier things in terms of movies. That's a fun thing to talk about. Um, and it could also be thought provoking, which this movie is. So if you're just coming into this at this point in time and you skip the intro, this is, of course, The Substance we're discussing. And what a movie. What a movie. So many things to talk about. You've already heard a lot of things about this movie by now. You've heard about it. It's a body horror. It's a feminist movie. It's a commentary on beauty standards. It's a commentary on what it is to be a woman. It's a commentary on body image stuff. It's like a ton of stuff. And it's an entertaining movie. And it is a thought-provoking movie. And it's also insanely emotional and vulnerable. There's something really vulnerable about this movie that I really appreciated. So, before I get into my deeper thoughts about this movie, some of you know this about me. I used to work for a maternal health organization, and I was the only male there for a lot of years. So if you know me, you know it's not uncommon for me to be the only man in a group of women. My graduate school cohort was like that. My day job was like that. My current job is that. And my just that's sort of been I have had my core boys, my two boys that I grew up with, and a lot of other young women who I also grew up with. And so a lot of these conversations, themes and things that arise in this movie are conversations that I've had with a lot of my friends. And I think there's a lot for as crazy as the packaging is of this movie, it's actually not that crazy. So this movie is about a woman by the name of Elizabeth Sparkle. She is a actress, megastar turned aerobics instructor, a la like Jane Fonda. You think of Jane Fonda and the career she had before she started the aerobics workout videotape series in the 80s. In the 1980s, aerobics was a huge thing. And I think you could see Elizabeth Sparkle at the point in time we meet her as a relic of that time. She's obviously older, and the movie is not shy about reminding her of that, which gives us, the audience, clues, keys us in to how she's feeling about herself at this point in time in her age. She's 50 and feeling considerably over the hill. There's all these signs and things that tell her that. She's telling herself that. There's a lot of stuff going on within that, which creates the environment for the need for something like The Substance to come into play. As an aging actor, or as an aging public persona, she wants to stay young. You want to stay desirable, which is not a fake idea. We see this all the time in the world of entertainment right now. And we see this in real life. In your everyday life, you might see little examples of this. The women in your life the people you know, maybe you yourself, as a woman, because there's messaging that men and women have played into across generations, a lot of generations, and the byproduct of that is people trying to chase youth, and this happens for men too, but it's way worse for women. And Elizabeth is in a situation where she's living that. She's being constantly reminded that she's in various ways that she's outlived her value. And when you consider something like the entertainment industry for women and how your cachet, as it were, your value, a lot of it is in your looks, how your body looks, how you're shaped, how your face is proportioned, how your hair is. All these different things are scrutinized all the time. And Elizabeth is in this very, very interesting predicament where and in the entertainment industry, of course, it's heightened. So girls and women all over the place deal with these same things every day. And not just from outward sources like movies, TV shows, sometimes video games if they're a gamer, but their friends, their girlfriends, their moms, their grandmoms, they've also been conditioned to move in a way that to tell their children and also themselves too. This is how women's supposed to look. This is how she's supposed to behave. And then the men are also conditioned too to be like, this is the kind of girl you want. You don't want someone who looks like this, and this. She has to look like this, and this. Like, it's all this messaging that gets played and replayed within our own systems too. And Elizabeth is a living, breathing example of this, having never found the place, the comfortable place at her age to feel okay in her body and to appreciate her age and appreciate her wisdom, regardless of where she looks physically. Enter the substance. If you've seen any trailer, you've heard sort of synopsises or little anything about this movie, you know that the substance is a creation that allows people to create or generate a younger, prettier, if you're a woman, and if you're a man too, like, this is, a better, quote, better version of you. And the rules are very clearly established, which is really cool about this substance. This is the kind of thing about movies and stories that's really cool, when you can come up with a device that has clearly defined rules and you see how the rules play out within its own logic and it makes sense. So with the substance, it is an invention that allows the user to create a younger version of themselves, and the two have to share existence and exist 7 days at a time. The older version gets to exist 7 days at a time, and then they have to sort of shut down and then allow the younger version to exist 7 days at a time. Now, without exception, that's the rule. Obviously, when there's any rules, they're going to be bent and broken. This is just how this works. So enter Sue. Sue is the younger version of Elizabeth, and you get some real juice when it comes to Sue. She's hotter. She's, her body parts are like plump, and she's like youthful and ready to like devour life. And it's an interesting conversation between the two of them, because you could look at that as conversations we have with ourselves. When we look in the mirror, sometimes we look in the mirror, we don't feel like we look that good. No matter who else is around you telling you look beautiful, you look handsome, you're excellent. If you don't believe it, it's not, you can't hear what anyone else is talking about. And I think Elizabeth is in that situation. She doesn't see herself as beautiful. She can't hold it when she hears it from other people. So she resorts to the substance and gives birth to Sue, and a lot of things transpire, and it's something else. It's powerful. It's wild. It's a lot. and I think it needs to be. So you might have heard how it's a lot of grossness. It's like the body horror is like, something akin to David Cronenberg or, like The Fly or anything like that. Like it's a lot of grossness. And maybe it is, but don't let that put you off from seeing this movie. I think if you go in with an open mind, there's a lot to be gleaned from the experience of this movie. It is tough to watch at certain points, if I'm being honest, sure. And frankly, it's tough to hear because the sound design is also majorly effective. If you were to watch and just do this and then hear all the sounds, all the like nasty sounds, whatever they used, I don't know what they used to make to achieve the sounds that they got, but it's just as bad as anything you might. It's actually probably worse than what you would see. And this is just from my opinion, and from my experience. You may have a different experience, and you might say, "Oh, that's a lot. It was just too much. It was too gross. It was too whatever." Okay, that may be. How I saw it was that it was necessary. It needed to be gross. It needed to be too much, because I read it as like, if you're not a woman and you imagine what it's like to exist in the world as a woman, even from the time when she's a child. If she's particularly pretty, even when you're very young, you become sexualized. If you think back to Emma Watson, when she was, during the Harry Potter movies, when she was, even from the first movie, people were like, "Oh, there were I remember there were web pages on the internet with countdown clocks counting down to when she turned 18. Like, if that's not the clearest example of what that is, I think it's just it's wild that at a young age of like 10, she was 10, I think, when she started those movies. As she was getting older, she was getting more attractive. And people were noticing, and it was like this, she was sexualized from the time she was a child. If you look at that, like, constantly, like, you get that, and this is just Emma Watson now. So you can imagine she's getting she's feeling it from a lot of different sides. Fans, like strangers, people online, sometimes people probably within her circle, maybe, so this is just the experience of one woman. Now you take that and look at if she was someone who was not Emma Watson. This happens to, I have several friends who, from when they were kids, they were same thing, were sexualized. Like, "Oh, she's so hot. You're going to be really pretty when you grow up." Now, imagine that kid, one of those kids who grew up to be Elizabeth in this movie. Now, she happens to be someone who she wanted to be in the entertainment industry because she grew up and did that. So she was going to get a lot of attention. She was pretty already as a younger person in high school, whatever it is. There's an example of this in the film where someone who knew her from her past recognizes her and still thinks she's beautiful, right? This is at a time when Elizabeth, she doesn't like how she looks. So this is a very real thing. So you can imagine all these messages she's getting from the outside world and what she's telling herself. That is a lot. So if the movie feels like a lot at certain points, I think it's justified, because it feels like it's necessary. And director Coralie Fargeat, she really had something to say about, you could feel it through this movie. And it's very electric and it's very alive, and it's tough to watch, but I think it's necessary to get the gist. You could almost sense her anger, like, as a woman herself, and as a filmmaker in a profession that is primarily dominated by a lot of men. You don't hear from a lot of women voices. It's changing now, but still, right now, the majority of films coming out that are even well known, even in the independent circle, is mostly men. So there's something to be said for that. How you could feel that she has something really fiery to say, and this movie, as her sophomore offering, the first of which we called Revenge, which I still need to see. I had it on my list for years to watch this movie. And now when you try to find it, it's not easy to watch. It's not easy to find to watch. But that's another one I'm going to try to get my hands on this season before the month of October ends to talk about. But yeah, dude, the movie really does a lot in that way. And you can feel her frustration at like, it's like all the messaging, the self-hatred, the unwanted attention, like that's been redirected now into this beautiful and dark and rich film. The acting in this movie is fantastic. Obviously, I think Demi Moore gets top marks. She is just an absolute force in this movie. The story asks a lot of her, and she doesn't disappoint. She has to wear prosthetics. She's got to really dig in and be vulnerable. And a lot of times there's not a lot of talking. Her character doesn't talk a lot in the movie. I don't know how many lines she speaks, but it's not like, Mad Max. I wouldn't count it as like Mad Max lines where he doesn't speak as much. If you look at like Fury Road or even like Road Warrior or any other movie where he speaks less, it's not quite like that. She does have some lines. She has things to say, but not as much. The most powerful stuff in this movie, though, coming from Demi Moore, is the scenes where she doesn't talk. It's very internal. You can see her looking in the mirror, examining herself. You can feel that that's real. That's an experience that women know that so innately. It's almost like she's not acting because she knows what that's like. She's been in this position. Even Demi Moore, like, she's beautiful. Right now, she's beautiful. And you know that she's had experiences in her life, and she has moments right now where she goes in the bathroom and looks in the mirror and is not happy with what she is looking at. That is the most real thing that's real. And it's portrayed just beautifully. It just feels so like, oh, you feel that. And in that way, it's more like, there's something about it being silent too, because you get to see the inner workings. You can almost see the messages that she's telling herself. There's a scene in this movie. You've probably heard about this scene. This is probably the centerpiece of the film. It is for me. I would say this is the centerpiece of this movie. It's really where all the themes of this movie come to a head. And it's a scene where Elizabeth is getting ready for a date, and it just takes her forever to get ready. She looks good, and then she doesn't look good. And then she's going to go do something else, and she doesn't think she looks good. So she changes her outfit. Then she looks in the mirror again. She doesn't like it. Then she looks again. She likes it. And then it's just this constant back and forth. And there's no conversation, no lines. But you can almost hear what she's telling herself. You can hear her inner monologue. No, it's not good. This isn't that. I feel like the movie works. That scene in the movie works best when her character is not speaking a lot. Like, you could see in a different movie where she might have had like a voiceover where she's in the mirror and she's talking to herself. You can hear her. Oh, that doesn't look good. No, what about this lipstick? What about this eyeliner? No, I need this dress. No, these shoes don't work. You can almost hear in another movie that's what it would be like. But the fact that this movie doesn't do that, it just makes that scene that much better, because that's what it is in real life. You're not talking, but you're not speaking out loud. You might be, but I think the way it's done here is just it's so authentic and so vulnerable. And she's just not with it. She's not feeling it. And I really loved that scene. I think that's probably it's probably one of the stronger scenes in the movie, and it's quiet. That's what this movie's about. This movie's about that. This is why Elizabeth's in the position she's in. This is why she uses the substance. And on the flip side, with Sue, the younger version, I talked about the sound design earlier and like the gross sounds. There's also a way in which sound plays a role in the movement of Sue. There's close-ups on her lips, close-ups on her butt, and the sound you hear, like breaths, like very sensual sounding breath. And like, it sounds really like steamy and smoldering. And whenever she's on screen, it's like, this is like, you feel like the heat coming off the screen. She's got some like fire. She's young and she's ready to take over the world. And she's like, and the way the movie depicts that with the close-ups and the shots of different parts of her body and the sounds, the breaths, it's like this longing, like, it's like, it's kind of sensual. So the way it does that, sound is actually a much bigger piece of that than just the visual. The way it's cut and everything is a factor, but the way it's acted is great. But that sound is a nice little touch that really gives you the smolderingness of what Sue's all about. She's about life and youth, and how she's the very epitome of what older actors, older people in the public eye are trying to get after. You're trying to find ways to stay young a little bit longer, just to hang on to it as long as you can. And Sue is Elizabeth's way of doing that. The other standout actor in this movie, I think, is probably Dennis Quaid. He is having so much fun, and it's cool to see. It's cool to see him really digging into the role, as he's playing a guy named Harvey, who is this producer, big shot, who's in charge of like ratings and making sure stuff makes a lot of money. He's one of the suits. So he's doing a good job, and he's having a lot of fun. And I'm talking about sound again. The way sound works whenever he's on screen is something else too. It feels very overbearing and overpowering, like it would if you imagine yourself as a average height, average size woman in the company of a lot of men who are bigger physically, who just take up more space physically than you do. There's something that feels overbearing and not comfortable and not fully safe. And I think the sound design does a good job of that too. Whenever Harvey's on screen and when other men who seem like they have power or control over Elizabeth or any other women in the situation, the sound makes it that much more rich. And when things get nasty, in terms of the horror piece, that sound is a huge piece of that. Also, the other thing I really appreciate about this movie is this idea of beauty equaling love and ugliness, meaning you're invisible. It's nothing. Like the idea that if you're pretty, people love you. There's this notion of pretty privilege, and pretty privilege shows up in this movie, and you get to see just very subtly how the world shifts when Elizabeth as Sue is a younger and prettier versus when she's older and not as desirable. It's so interesting. It reminded me of a conversation I had with one of my older friends who was sharing third hand another story. She was telling about another woman she's spoken to. They're both probably in their 60s or so, and how they were going through the world and not being noticed and catcalled by men, and how liberating it felt after a lifetime of that. This particular woman enjoyed feeling like she had less eyes on her. And there was another woman in the room who admitted that she wouldn't know how to handle that. She's a younger, prettier woman. She's quite attractive, and going from all this attention all your life to suddenly no attention or very little attention. I could see it could be a shock. Like if everyone's telling you you're pretty all the time, and all of a sudden that just stops, that's got to be a shock to the system. And this feels like something that Elizabeth is going through. Like, you're great, and then you're not anymore. All of a sudden, like, we loved you, like past tense. You were awesome. You're not awesome now. Like, there's some weird, like, mental, like, gymnastics that you have to do to sort of get your head around that. And as an audience member, you're going like, dude, why didn't you recognize that you're beautiful? You don't need to do all this stuff. You don't need all this work done. You have all these awards. You have a great life. Just enjoy your life. We can't tell her that. No one else can really get her to appreciate what she has. She has to get to a place where she does that on her own. And unfortunately for Elizabeth, she can't, because that's why she has to use a substance. So, and we get to see what that means for her. Look, Coralie Fargeat did an amazing job with this sophomore feature. It's amazing. She only has 2 films, and this mess has like it's Revenge. I hear is really good, so I'm excited to get that. But I know, having seen this one, I'm that much more excited to see Revenge. I was already peaked. My interest was already peaked for years to watch this movie. I remember when it was first coming out, like the trailers were first hitting, and I was like, that looks like it's going to be good. I'm going to watch that. And I just hadn't got around to it. But after watching The Substance, I'm definitely going to check it out. So this movie is great. The third act is wild. Just, know that it's wild in all the ways that you might expect. And in some ways you won't. You won't expect what the movie gives you. And that's great. I like how you think it's going to be one kind of movie and it's not. Like at all. It's not at all. So just know that it's whatever you think it is, whatever. It's not going to be what you think it is. And whatever your second thought is, it's not going to be that either. So just know, just know that. Definitely recommend, watch it, and let me know what you think when you get a chance. So I'm going to call it on this review. I got a few more movies to talk about in the spooky, horror, thriller vein lined up. So stick around. Those videos are coming up real soon. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video and hang out with me for a little bit. And I'll see you in the next one. Take it easy, be well, and be safe, and like if you need to find a safe place, like do that. That's what I'm doing. Make sure you do that. All right. I'm out of here. I'll see you in the next one. Boom. And because I had to be secret, I got to do this one. So see you later.